Welcome to the Business Greater Than You podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of men and women who have successfully transcended the frazzled solopreneur life and built productive teams with better lifestyle and income.
I'm Nelson Bars, the founder and owner of Utah Independent Mortgage Corp.
And I'm Liz Sears, founder and co-owner of My Utah Agents.
We're excited for you to listen, interact, and grow with us. So please share your comments below and let's get started. All right. We are ready for our first book review episode.
Yes, I'm excited about this one.
We are going to take some time to talk about the E-Myth Revisited, probably the most famous book that I ever hear about when it comes to small business, starting a business. Just about everybody will recommend this to someone.
Yeah,
right?
Michael Gerber is brilliant. And it's funny because I've read this book several times over the last couple decades, and reading it this time, especially with the intent of talking about it here, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much applicable stuff that didn't apply to me last time. So I didn't really pick up on it. But now reading it this time, I'm like, dang it, I should have read it again right when I opened my business. So
yeah, I read it. Yeah. I probably haven't read it in 20 years. I read it in business school, and I thought, I got this. You know? Yeah,
it was brilliant.
And I just getting ready for this podcast, reviewing it, I'm like, oh, wow, there's a lot that I am not doing in my business that I should be doing. I need to do better at this and that. So very excited to dive into it. First, let's just define what the title means. What is the E-Myth?
So it's the entrepreneur myth that people think that there's a certain way that it's all going to happen. I love how he uses the baking pies person in the book consistently, where because she's really great at baking pies, she should open a bakery that bakes pies, and then life will be fantastic.
Yeah, so he defines it a couple times in the book. The first one, it kind of caught me off guard because I've always heard the entrepreneur myth is if you're a good technician, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good business owner, right? If you can bake pies, doesn't mean you can run a pie shop.
Right.
But at the very beginning, he says, the myth says that small businesses are started by entrepreneurs risking capital to make a profit. And he says this is simply not so. Like, we're not entrepreneurs. A lot of us who start a business, me, I'm just a mortgage guy, right?
Yep.
Thinking that I could do it better than the guy I was working for previously. And I think most of us who've tried it get humbled eventually. Like, okay.
Sometimes really fast we get humbled.
Or you find yourself just trying to mimic what the other company was doing, right? I find myself wanting to just establish the same company that I used to work for on all the same patterns and policies and everything, right?
Yep.
So that's the myth. The myth is that everybody's a good entrepreneur and that technicians should start their own business. And it's just not true. So what the difference is? What is the difference? I mean, running a business, we talk about it on this podcast a lot, right? It's about, has nothing to do with mortgages for me. It's not about credit reports. It's not about, closing on time. It's hiring, it's training, it's recruiting, it's firing, it's managing.
Yep.
Right? And it's
being the diplomat. It's being there's so much to it. And having the vision, the entrepreneur portion of this, of knowing where you want to go and building everything accordingly and rolling people into your dream of what it is that you're building together.
Yeah. So. The vision, to me, I when I read about the vision in here, the entrepreneurial vision and how important that was, I felt a little bit like I've lost that edge in my company the last year or so. I don't think I've been extremely visionary, right? I don't think I've really been focused on the future. It's kind of more about survival and the day-to-day.
And I think that's something that most everybody I've talked to that has a business says, is that you almost go through seasons of time where you're really leaning towards the vision, the building, the everything like that. And then it's almost like you get too far in the future and your day-to-day isn't caught up. And so you have to back off and then come back to the day-to-day and get that going. And as you get sucked into the busyness of the day-to-day, everything, you're like, what is my vision? What am I even working for?
Well, and okay, so what you're saying to me goes along with what he says about the three different personalities, right? The entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. I feel like, for me especially, they're three competing interests
Yep.
And like you said, sometimes the pendulum swings towards one too much or towards
Well,
the
let's
other
actually
one.
talk about what those three are.
Okay.
So the entrepreneur is the person looking into the future. They're the ones who have the vision. They can see how it can all play out. They want to create all of the job descriptions and the different pieces and the structure and all of that.
The entrepreneur creates a great deal of havoc around him.
That too. Very much so.
People, a lot of people who are the manager type or the technician type get annoyed by the entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
Thinking about change.
And I've been
implementing new
accused of
things.
changing things too many times
Yes.
because I can see how it would be so much better if we do this.
I do think you have a strong entrepreneurial personality, right? You're a visionary, for sure.
For sure.
Okay, the manager. This is the pragmatic manager, planning, organizing. To me, this is probably where I spend way too much of my time, right? I'm way too in the weeds. It says in here, the entrepreneur thrives on change. The manager thrives on the status quo, clings to the status quo.
Yep. And the manager is the one almost looking in the past. They're taking all of the data, seeing how it worked, what, implementation of, the systems and the processes already there. And
So here's a question I
analyzing.
have before we go on to the technician.
yes.
In this book, he's talking about each of us have these different personalities inside of us.
Right.
Do you find it tempting to try to just ignore the other two parts in you and just find other people to do it?
Yes.
And where's the balance for you?
So I very much prefer to be the visionary and coming up with what's going to make things better, smoother, faster, efficient, effective. And so if I can find someone to do the other pieces, that just makes me so happy. But I have found that I almost abdicate too much on that because I'd rather just, you take it, you run with it, do
Yeah.
a great job. Let me know if you need anything type thing. And that's kind of come back to bite me a little bit too, because if I am too much looking into the future, not considering what we've already got, where we've already been, and, the whole he who doesn't study history is doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
So taking that more into consideration.
Well, I think for me, my goal is to balance these three or to spend time in each three and even work on my time management to where, I've got a time block now in my week that says work on the business. It's a 2-hour segment where I'm free to decide and think about the future and make policy changes or, a lot of times it's like I know there's a checklist I'm supposed to make. I've been putting it off for 3 weeks and now I'm finally going to do it. Right.
Yep. Shannon and I have our meeting like that. Our business name, well, first our initials are Shannon Olson, Liz Sears, so SOLS. And so we named our company Empowered Souls.
Cool.
And so that's what we obviously spelled SOLS. And so that's what we call our visionary meeting that we have every week is our Empowered Souls meeting.
Empowered Souls.
Yep.
Okay.
So we start off by, just seeing if there's anything between us that, may have come up the past week, any decisions we made that the other needs to be made aware of, and then what are our visions, what's the next piece we're building on.
Smart.
That's been helpful, especially because she and I, there are times when I get sucked into the manager role, and I really, really like that too. I'm totally somebody who loves spreadsheets and analyzing data and running the numbers and things like that. And ever since I was a little kid, I would get sucked into all of that. And so it's also, like you said, the whole time block of, making sure I'm hitting each piece.
Yeah. So the technician is the doer, right? I think that's what we mostly visualize ourselves doing when I don't know. Maybe some people start a company and visualize themselves never doing the technician work ever again. Right?
Yeah.
I remember we interviewed Nuria, who has a title company, and it stood out to me that when she started her company, she knew she couldn't do the title work anymore. She couldn't be the escrow officer.
Right.
And she decided not to. And that was a huge leap of faith in my mind from her. Something that I've wanted to do many times and never had the courage to do it in my company is to say, okay, I'm not going to do loans. I'm just going to run the business.
Yep. Right. And same thing with Shannon with the my Utah Stagers.
Yeah.
That she was never the technician.
Never from the start.
Yep.
Yeah.
She just bought it and had other people doing it.
But I think a lot of technicians, they think they're just going to be a technician and it's going to be better.
Yeah, I don't have a boss now.
Yeah.
Nope, your job is now your boss.
Yeah,
Your company is your boss.
The job becomes the boss. So I do have a one quote I want to share from Michael Gerber here.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is that we all have an entrepreneur, manager, and technician inside us. And if they were equally balanced, we would be describing an incredibly competent individual.
Ooh,
that's on page 28.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that should be, in my mind, a goal is to manage my time and my focus and make sure that I'm doing all three. I think the manager piece gets ignored. He talks a lot in the book about, you know, that widget case study where there's an entrepreneur and there's technician work, but nobody's doing the managing, and it just blows up. Right?
Yep. You know, just because we have mentioned religion a couple times in here, I remember once reading a personality assessment test, and a lot of people tend to think that their personality is the right one and the other personalities are the wrong ones. And they see that. And I remember somebody once telling me that Jesus Christ is all four personalities, is just all the good parts. And I was like, that's an interesting thing to strive for.
Balanced individual.
Yeah. So now also striving for entrepreneur, manager, and technician. And that would be an incredibly competent individual. I love that.
You know, speaking about personalities, personalities, that's the you know, the topic of personalities and the DISC test and the Enneagram.
Yep.
Something I've really gravitated to a lot in my life. I had a chance to teach a college class about communication where we focused on personalities. Everybody took a test and we spent the whole semester, and it was the DISC test. So we talk about the D's and the I's and the S's and the C's. And And then recently I was reading a book on the Enneagram, and it was interesting to hear the perspective that a personality is a facade, right? It's not necessarily a good thing or something even to be proud of. It's like you're hiding behind a mask, right?
Interesting.
The nice guy persona or the driven persona. And I think there's, you know, he even talks in this book about organizing your company around personalities versus roles.
Interesting.
And I think there's room in the conversation for personality, but I've just learned to caution that, you know, like you say, the balanced personality probably would be someone who isn't trying to mask anything or hide anything. They're kind of able to be all four or whatever categorize you're doing at any given time. So that's an interesting, I don't know, side tangent about personalities.
You know what, though? It's something that all business owners, the more that they learn about and the more that they know how to navigate, it can help them be more successful. So I think that's fascinating and completely appropriate.
Okay. Any thoughts about, he gives us 3 stages of a business: infancy, adolescence, and maturity? Yes.
And that is such you know, Tony Robbins, the business master I went to, they talked a ton about that as well. And they even talked about how it can even go past maturity into old age. And if you're not careful, that you can actually have your business atrophy and then go out of business if you're not willing to shift with it. And so I love how he starts with the infancy stage and just talking about how as a baby business, when you just have...
You're doing it all yourself, basically, right? You're
every single job role.
Wearing every hat. I think that's pretty normal. I mean, I think in some ways it is a great way to start your company. And as long as you're, like they say in here, starting with the end in mind, and you're building and you're acting as if... There's a great quote in here from the founder of IBM who talks about how the reason why his company was successful is because he had a vision from the start of what he wanted it to look like, and he realized we're going to have to act like that now.
Yes.
And we're going to have to be the IBM that I envision today, right?
Yep. There was a real estate company that when they very first opened, they would answer the phone, international headquarters. They're like, someday we
company,
will be. Yeah. And I love in here where he talks about when you first start working, sometimes it's 10, 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And even when you're at home, you're at work. And so this is where it's also so important that you do create some sort of boundaries, which he talks about later in the book. But just knowing at the very beginning, the owner and the business are one, and they're the same thing. It's all you.
Yeah, and this is what we're trying to do with this podcast, right? We want to help people who are in the infancy stage. They've got a business, they've got deals flowing, business flowing, but it's time to hire. It's time to build a team, right?
Yes.
And he gives us some ways not to, and some ways to. The management by abdication instead of delegation. You know, I think we've all experienced that. And my philosophy has been that a lot of times a failed employee is my own fault because I didn't have the right policies, procedures, and training in place for them to succeed. I just hoped they would show up and rock and kill it and be great, and I could just enjoy the fruits of that, right? But it's never been that way.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Well, I think for me, a lot of it's been slow, right? Just the training process is time consuming. They have to watch me, and then I have to watch them, and it's not, you can't skip too fast ahead. We just finished interviewing Eric Barlow, and that was his he said that multiple times, just like take it one step at a time.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And I love, here's the actual quote when they were talking about how if your business depends on you, you don't own a business, you have a job. And it's the worst job in the world because you're working for a lunatic.
Yeah.
And then the next part, it talks about the purpose of going into business is to get free of a job so that you can create jobs for other people. And that is really where the whole, not only are you creating jobs for other people, so there's fulfillment and meaning of that, making a difference, having an impact and a legacy, but it also can be very profitable when you follow all the right steps and do it the right way.
Yeah. So he takes us through the adolescence stage, and it's kind of fun to read his stories of, there's just more balls in the air now, more balls to drop, right?
Yep.
Because there's just more juggling happening, and if you're not managing it well, then you could turn around and run right back to the infancy stage, right? He talks about getting small again, where an entrepreneur may find that, oh, that was too hard. All the balls dropped. It was a disaster. So
I'm just going to do it myself.
I'll do it all myself now, right?
Yeah.
And then how common that is for a small business to try to grow, to get to that stage and get burned and go right back to just solopreneur.
Right. So any of you listeners, if that's ever been you or if you're tempted to do that, get this book. There is so much good information in here about how to stop. In fact, a running narrative throughout the entire book is the All About Pies lady and how he takes her from being that working for a lunatic to embracing her entrepreneur and not just living as the technician. And so then growing to the next level. By the way, her name is Sarah. So that way I stopped calling
Sarah's
her
the pie lady.
Pie lady.
Before you go on to
Yeah.
maturity, one thing he points out that I think is important, and this may be where my business is right now. He says, surviving in adolescence could be the worst place to be, right? So
For sure.
if you are in adolescence, you're consumed by the business and the possibility of losing it. So you put everything you have into it. And for whatever reason, you manage to keep it going day after day, fighting the same battles in exactly the same way you did before. You never change. Night after night, you go home to unwind, only to wind up even tighter in anticipation of tomorrow. So I think that's the messy middle, right? That's where you're trying to create a business that runs smooth, but still so much depends on you.
Yeah, and we talk about the messy middle a lot. And I love one of the quotes a friend of mine said. He goes, it's normal for your business to go through the dump at a point in time. The point is, don't set up camp there.
And that's what he's saying, setting up camp. I think there are a lot of businesses that forever live in that mode, right? There is an owner who's still the hub of everything that has to happen in the office. There are employees, they don't feel very empowered, right? The owner's not enjoying the lifestyle he wanted when he or she started the company. It's kind of the worst place to settle in and exist, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about maturity.
Okay.
I don't even know where that part is in the book.
Because they're talking a lot about the comfort zone right here, and we can get stuck in there and we can get stuck out of there. But
a mature business knows how it got to where it is and what it must do to get to where it wants to go.
Thank you.
Maturity is not an inevitable result of the first two phases. I thought that stood out. It's not automatically just going to come, right? It's going to take intention to get there.
Specific, intentional work.
Yeah. So he gives us a model for how to build. I mean, kind of at that point, we get to part 2 of the book where we talk about the turnkey revolution, right? And he goes into the story of Ray Kroc and McDonald's. And by the way, have you ever seen that movie, The Founder?
No, but I've heard it's amazing.
It's pretty good. It doesn't really paint a great picture of Ray Kroc, though. He does. In this book, he kind of makes Ray Kroc out to be...
Well, Ray Kroc was just kind of brilliant. When he walked into McDonald's, he saw this runs like clockwork. This is turnkey. And so like the whole concept that is also talked about in this book is that when you build your company, you want to build it with the potential of franchising. And he says, not because you're going to do it, but just because when everything is systematic as a franchise would need to be, and training for the lowest skilled person possible to do the job, that is what makes it profitable. Because if you're structuring your business where everyone that works for you has to be extremely intelligent, extremely skilled, you are really building yourself into a box. Yeah. Because being able to find people to fill those positions can be very difficult, especially in our current labor market.
This is when I reviewed this, I thought about my company, right? I feel like what we do is pretty dang complicated, right? I've seen some businesses who break it down into an assembly line, or who try to parcel out the work into very small bite-sized pieces, and I've resisted that probably unwisely. To the point where, we're pretty dependent on good people to do a good job. So I've started to think about what could I do in my business to try to simplify some of the jobs, get more entry-level people in, still give them room to grow, but take the people I have now and help them be more trainers, managers, leaders, and let's bring in some new, fresh faces that can do pieces of the job and learn the business step by step, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Another thing that he talks about in here on page 74, he says, the entrepreneurial model does not start with a picture of the business to be created, but of the customer for whom the business is to be created. It understands that without a clear picture of that customer, no business can succeed. Because what we end up doing as entrepreneurs is we build what we want to run, not necessarily what will service the clients the very best. And so if we build it around our clients, always with them first, and then what we want to build second, that is how you get a successful business.
He goes through an example of that widget company, right? The first time was a disaster, and then he says, let's take a step back and let's do this the right way. And this is later in the book, but he's talking about, okay, first the two partners are going to sit down and they're going to draw an organization chart, right? And they're going to decide what each role needs to be. And there might be 15 roles, but there's only 2 guys.
Right.
So then they have to sign out who's going to do each role.
Well, even before that step, the one thing that kind of blew my mind, because I'm like, I didn't do this, is they listed out the roles, and for them it was 8 roles. And then they wrote the entire job description, and then they wrote the contract for it. Then they divvied it up.
And then they had to commit to each other to fulfill that job contract.
They signed the contract. And they said, I am in charge of this job description and this role until we hire someone to replace me. Right. And then the next thing that they did is, as they took on the roles, they perfected the lowest level first so that they could hand it off. Instead of perfecting the upper levels first so that they could do a better job while still having to do the lower ones too. I thought that was brilliant.
So I have a question. Do you have an organization chart for your company?
We do.
Is it updated?
I think the last time we updated it was about 6 months ago. So
Me too.
Probably time to look at that again. Although I will say that, in fact, this is so pertinent to this book right now. So our director of operations, we've actually, since we lost both of our front desk people for different reasons and our transaction manager, we said we originally created their job descriptions around their strengths and weaknesses instead of what we need the role to be. And it's not as efficient and effective, those are my 2 favorite words apparently today, as it could be. And so we tasked our director of operations to rewrite the job descriptions. I thought it was going to be a 3 to 4 hour project. Well, we hired a business coach to work with her to build it out, found out it's like a 15 to 20 hour project. 3 to 4 hours is what I thought, 15 to 20 is what it actually is. And the first thing that they did was they identified all the tasks and projects that need to be done. What are the top 20%? What are the strengths, the skills, and the knowledge that each role would need to have? And then how to train accordingly to maximize on those. And from our other coach, he said, the 20%, the most important, if they can do that, they got a job. If they can only do the 80%, which is the less important, they don't. But if they want a raise and a promotion, they got to do all of it.
Wow.
But to do that, you have to know what is the 20% of each role. So not just the job description, but also the role too.
So I'm just thinking about how I've built my business, right? I'm thinking, have I built it around personalities or have I built it around job roles?
Yeah.
Right. And I think both. We tried really hard to define the position first, write up a job description, and then start interviewing and try to find someone who has a personality that would match that position, right?
Right.
But I think one thing that I've failed to do is stay strong to those job duties. Instead, I get someone in and they don't like it after a few months, and then I'm like, okay, we're going to mold a job to you. We're going to create a job that meets your perfect world because I want to keep you. I want you to stay, right? And instead of just holding them accountable to the job, and if it doesn't fit,
right,
we end up morphing the business plan, right?
This one business coach about the 20 and 80%, he goes, I don't care if they mix and match the 80%, but that 20% stays with the role. If they can't do it, they don't have the job.
Wow.
So it gives a little bit of flexibility, but not on the things that end up leaving you completely imbalanced. When you go to hire the next person, you're like, well, what's their job description now?
No, it's good. It sounds like you're getting some good coaching. I want to read, so there's a section here where he talks about Ray Kroc's McDonald's, right? And just how detailed. He talks about how the French fries, this is on page 93, the French fries were left in the warming bin for no more than 7 minutes. Hamburgers were moved from the hot trays no more than 10 minutes so that they retain the proper moisture, right? Talks about how the pickles are placed by hand in the right pattern on the burgers. And which
is so true. If you open up your hamburger to add something, you're like, yep, there's the pickles.
Usually. If they're following the plan, right?
Right.
Food was served within 60 seconds. Discipline, standardization, and order were the watchwords. I guess sometimes I bristle when I think about trying to run my business this way. Because I don't know, as an employee, if I would want that.
Right.
Like the micromanagement that he's talking about here. I mean, McDonald's is famous for it, right? It's so systematic. What do you say to that fear of mine? Am I just worrying too much about these employees and should focus more on the job at hand?
I think what it really boils down to is the presentation, honestly, because what I have found even in my own personal life is that there are certain things that if I do them in the exact same order every single time, such as morning routine, you know, that it frees up my mind to think about other stuff. But if I don't, then I almost pay more attention to the different things that I'm doing, or the way that I open my email and scrub it, or the way that I make a hamburger, you know, is that if I have a very clean system that is identical every time I do it, then it actually frees up more time because it's done quicker and accurate. You're not wasting time going back and fixing something. And so I think a lot of what happens in our day is dependent on what else is happening. You know, we get thrown curveballs and wild, you know, things all the time. But on everything that can be systematic can actually bring peace and just structure and calm to the day, because at least those pieces always happen the same.
And I think certain people would love it and certain people would hate it, right?
Yeah.
I think it just depends.
Yep.
I was thinking about, we just finished interviewing Eric Barlow. His is the opposite philosophy. It's like high trust, good people that have been with him for 8 to 10 years. He doesn't micromanage them, and they like that, right?
But he did train him, he said, in the very beginning very thoroughly. And then
they earn that trust.
Yeah. So maybe there's...
So no skipping steps is what you're saying.
Probably.
Awesome.
That would serve well.
What else stood out to you in the book?
I really like this, just on page 96 where it ended it. It says, how do you create your franchise prototype? You know, how do you, like Ray Kroc, build a business that works predictably, effortlessly, and profitably each and every day? And I think that's an area that, as entrepreneurs, if we spend the time necessary to build and refine and continue with that we will be able to have the ultimate goal, which is profitably.
Predictably, effortlessly, and profitably.
Yep.
That sounds like a pretty good business.
I would like that. That would be fun.
And is this where the phrase came from, working on your business, not in it?
I hear
it all the time, and he must have been the coiner of the phrase.
I've been hearing it for years, so now I'm curious. Like when was this? 95.
This is the second edition, though.
Oh, that's true.
This is E-Myth Revisited.
Yeah, because he said he started in the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to credit Michael Gerber is who said working on your business, not in it. So for those who have never heard the term before, working in your business is being the technician. It's doing the job. It's, you know, fulfilling the orders, providing customer service. Working on your business is the entrepreneur. It's the vision. It's the what's next piece to build out.
Creating systems, right? Documenting, everything. So he goes through and talks about creating a model, right? A model for your business to follow. I've just plugged into someone else's model for the most part, right? Found a coach and follow their model to the best of our ability. But the idea is that it gives consistent value to your customers.
Right.
You go get a burger at McDonald's, it's what you want.
Yep.
Whether you're in California or in New York, you're going to have the same experience.
Yep. Pickles might be placed differently, but but for the most part.
So he goes through, he talks about building a model, but I'm wondering if we could maybe just get to the part where he's talking about these different processes, the business development process, innovation, and then he talks about
tracking it. What was the word he used for that?
Quantification.
Yep. So not just tracking the numbers, but
and then my favorite word that
story.
has been sticking out in my mind is orchestration.
Yes. So part 3, building a small business that works. So the first step, innovation, like you were talking about. It's often thought of as creativity, but it's also getting things done.
And he talks about really small innovations, right? So some examples he gives is like, instead of saying, "Hi, may I help you?" Try saying, "Hi, have you been in here before?" Which a lot of people use that. I hear it at restaurants all the time, right? "Have you ever been here before?"
Yep.
But it's a very nerdy way of measuring the results of that little innovation, right?
So here's something that we do for innovation that might be kind of fun is when we send out our newsletters, we'll usually send out 10% with a particular subject line. And then we track the open rate, and then we'll send out 10% more with a different subject line. And so by the third group, we kind of know which one's going to get the most opens, and then we send out the bulk of the rest.
Okay.
And so the more that we've been trying different approaches and then collecting the data, then it's helped us be able to make more.
It's data driven. It's the quantification part, right?
And so coming up with those ideas, being innovative about different ways to.
Another example is asking a salesperson for 3 weeks to wear a brown suit, and then 3 weeks later you go to navy blue, and you measure the results, right?
That's hilarious. There was this one, I don't know how it applies here, but I'll tell the story anyways because it popped in my head, is they were talking about trying to figure out what would help employees be more productive. And so they tried having the lights at full brightness, and then they moved the lights to slightly dimmer, and they were talking to the employees, we want to see what works. And so they tried 2 or 3 different things, and then they did it with a different group of people, but they didn't tell them what they were doing. They just changed the lights, and changing the lights without telling them did nothing, but changing the lights with telling them that we're just trying to see what would help actually caused them to be more productive. So sometimes it's also communicating
I think the thing to learn from this whole idea of innovation, quantification, orchestration is nobody's going to just get it right the first moment. Like, I'm going to divine the right business plan on day one, and we're going to run it that way because I'm so smart, right?
It's like parenting. You can get a perfect manual made after your first kid, and it doesn't work at all with your second. So even if somebody has a process that works, it might not work for you.
Yeah.
So gathering your own data.
The idea of just trying new things, having no clue. You know, I've studied a lot of direct mail stuff, and a lot of guys talk about how they've arrived at what works. Right? And they just try things that they don't think will work. They do A/B test, and they stick with the one that worked. And then the next week, they try to tweak it a little bit. A/B test, stick with the one that works. Over the years, you develop a pretty effective mail piece that you can use through this innovation quantification process.
Yeah, so the quantification then is just taking all of that data, analyzing it, and deciding and determining what is working and what isn't.
Which is really hard work.
Oh, my goodness.
Getting the data is really hard. He talks about quantifying everything. He says, I mean everything. How many customers do you see in person each day? How many in the morning? How many in the afternoon? How many people call? How many ask about price?
How many minutes did they stay in the store? How many minutes on the phone?
Once again, picturing, running a business this way. And it can be so tedious that I don't know if I want to ask my people to do it. Just honestly, it's like we've tried to implement some of the stuff from 4 Disciplines of Execution, which is another book that dives really into quantification, right?
Yes.
And it's like, really, you want me to micro track every single thing I do every moment? And we've found ways to automatically track things. Like if you can get a good CRM, a good phone system that integrate with each other, there's a lot of data that you can auto track, how many calls, how long they last, who has better conversion rate on leads and things like that can be done.
Because we're already tracking if we convert the lead into an appointment,
right.
So
there's a lot of technology that can automate some of the tracking, but some of it is just as simple as a checklist or a tracker that gets turned in every night by your team so that you can start gathering data and deciding what works.
Yep. And then I love that once you've done your innovation and you've tried a bunch of things, and then once you've quantified it, that's when you do the orchestration. And the orchestration is eliminating all of the other pieces that don't work. So you just kind of boil it down to the pieces that work for you.
He says the elimination of discretion or choice at the operating level of your business.
Yep.
You think about an orchestra, right? How much discretion or choice do the players in an orchestra have?
Like none.
None, right?
They follow the director.
The script. They're following the director and the written music.
The score and the director. That is about it.
Yeah. And I think
their vibrato, that's their discretion. For the
And
violin.
I think this also speaks to like, how long are you going to stick with this new policy, right? The orchestration is expecting it to continue week after week, month after month, and not forget about it in favor of the next new idea.
Yep.
Right. And you got to say it. Somebody once said, the CEO is the chief reminding officer. Just has to say the same thing over and over again
chief
to their team.
Chief reminding officer.
Right?
I love that.
So I want to read this. The need for orchestration is based on the absolutely quantifiable certainty that people will do only one thing predictably, and that is to be unpredictable. But for your business to be predictable, your people must be. And he says, to give your customer what he wants every single time. Why? Because unless your customer gets everything he wants every single time, he will go someplace else to get it.
Yep.
Right?
That's exactly true.
Very good. What else, Liz? What else stood out to you from this book?
One of the pieces that I really liked where it said your business development program in chapter 11, he breaks it down into 7 categories. And so your primary aim, getting super clear on what exactly it is that you want to do.
And that's more about a life thing. It's not so much about your business. It's like, how do I want my life to look?
Exactly. Because as the business owner, it has to be the full picture of everything. And then your strategic objective, which is more dialing it into the business. And then you go into your organizational strategy, basically making your org chart, how it's going to work with each other, all the different roles. And then your management strategy. Eric with Norm's Plumbing was a really good example of how his management strategy is very different than a lot of other ones. And then your people strategy, hiring, working with them, keeping them happy. Your marketing strategy, how do you get the word out so that people know to come in, buy from you, and then your system strategy. So one of the business people that I particularly admire said that his goal was every single week to systematize something. So he was constantly being aware of what are the things that he does and what can he systematize.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how different my life would be a year from now if I systematized 52 things that I do. That'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay.
So for me, like this organization chart philosophy and a lot of this work gets done before you ever sell a product, right? Before you ever do anything. And he goes through that example. But I remember when I started my company, that's how I organized my file folders. I had marketing manager, and I had loan officer, and I had processor, and then I had CEO, and I had accountant. And every time I did work under one of those hats, because I was just doing all of it myself,
right,
everything was saved in that folder because I knew someday I would be bringing on a marketing manager, and I would be able to kind of sit down with them and give them a folder with everything that they need to know and do. Right?
Brilliant.
So that's kind of the mentality of the E-Myth, right? You're documenting from the bottom up all the processes that you expect to be done, and only then are you ready to actually bring someone in and train them.
Right.
And you just keep moving yourself up one level at a time in your organization. Right?
Yeah. There were a couple things in chapter 12 that super stood out to me. Stephen Covey, I think, was the first time I'd ever heard this concept of writing your own obituary. And in here he talks about, finding yourself in a room and there's a box and there's a body in it and it's yours. And they're starting to read or play a video of you telling your story. I was like, maybe I will do that. Tell my own one right now, and they have to play my video. And you're telling them the story of your life. And then he says, how would you like that story to go? And then turn the page. He says, all you need to do is begin living your life as if it were important. All you need to do is take your life seriously, to create intentionally, to actively make your life into the life you wish it to be. Simple? Yes. Easy? No.
I don't know if this is, on the next page, he says, I believe it's true that the difference between great people and everyone else is that great people create their lives actively, while everyone else is created in their lives passively, waiting to see where life takes them next.
You know, I had a very powerful coaching session with one of my coaches last week that is exactly this. And so I'm going to tell the little story here really quick. In fact,
story time.
I'll try the activity on you.
We'll
see how it goes. Okay.
We didn't pre-approve this first.
We didn't. So this is going to be even more fun. All right. If everything in your job and everything that you do were functioning perfectly, like clockwork, exactly how you'd like, what emotions would you be experiencing?
Exhilaration.
Okay. What else?
Peace.
Exhilaration, peace.
Those are like two opposites. I'd be really happy and thrilled, but I would also be at peace and comfortable.
Good thing they can't see this because I don't know if I spelled these right. Spelled peace right. Okay. Give me like 5 more. Sure, that emotion too.
Satisfied.
Okay.
Confident.
Okay.
Optimistic.
Okay.
Probably energized, ready for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough? Can I stop?
Sure.
Okay.
But if you have another one pop in your head, tell me. Okay.
All right.
All right. So what?
Hungry.
Yes, that's a good one. So if I had you list all the different pieces of your business, every single little part that you do that you're involved in, we could probably come up with 30, 40, 50 things at least. So I want you to think of one of those that's not running exactly the way you want right now.
Okay.
Like if you ranked it as not working.
You want me to say it out loud?
If you want to.
Probably the sales side.
Okay.
Struggling right now.
Sales side. All right. So I'm going to put my book just because this is how it works for me. So these are the emotions, all right, that you want to feel if your life was going exactly like you'd enjoy. Exhilaration, peace, confidence, satisfied, optimistic, energized.
Mm-hmm.
This is your sales. Not quite working the way you want.
Right.
Okay. How would you, or what would you do, like an action item, if you were experiencing this, you were creating this experience in your life, in your sales area of your business, but nothing here had changed. The circumstances were all identical as they are right now, but you're feeling and experiencing satisfaction, confidence, exhilaration.
So if I already felt that way,
if you felt this way, what would you do? Yeah, like what would something you do today?
Probably make a lot more sales calls.
Okay. What's something else you might do? You're feeling confident. You're feeling excited. You're feeling energized.
Recruit more.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And probably get out there in the community and meet more business partners like real estate agents and CPAs, financial planners.
Yeah. What are some things you might do with some of your staff if this is what you're feeling in regards to sales?
Probably motivate them, probably encourage them, probably inspire more.
Yeah. So at the end of this coaching session, what she said to me is she's like, Liz, your emotions and how you show up and how you live your life, what you create, has nothing to do with what's going on. You can literally experience all of these even in a section of your business that's not working how you want. And so I started thinking about that. And one of the things that obviously I mentioned isn't quite working right now is the fact that we lost some pretty key employees. And so she said, what's something you would do if this is what you were experiencing? And I said, well, I'd probably call our director of operations and tell her I'm super proud of what she's done so far and that I'm super excited to see the 20% because that was her next piece and see if she needed anything. And she's like, okay, do it. I said, okay. So I called her and I just told her, because it was true, I am proud of what she's done. My overwhelming emotion was there's not enough done. My overwhelming thought when I wasn't experiencing this, I was just experiencing the situation. I was abdicating my experience to the circumstances. The circumstances said, feel stressed, feel overwhelmed, feel crappy, feel all these things. The circumstances said to feel that. So I was like, okay, I feel down, I feel bad. But I chose to show up like this. I called her and told her that. And she's like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how much that means to me, because now I just thought that I wasn't doing a good enough job. And then she showed up way better for the next several hours, like just energized herself.
So I think
crazy.
I think the takeaway for me is emotions, they are not at the mercy of the circumstance, right?
Yeah,
they actually create the circumstance, right? The emotions come way before the results that you think are causing the emotions.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll be feeling like this and circumstances will shift. And a lot of people, instead of acting intentionally, like he talks about in here, they just let the circumstances tell them how to feel. And they're like, okay, fine. They don't choose.
Intentionally
they fail
creating
to choose
their life and their business with careful thought and planning.
And not just, so how they experience life. So there you go.
Well, as we wrap this up, are there any other outstanding thoughts that you want to share? I have one quote I want to close with, but I want to give you a minute to bring up anything else.
A couple more
that
things
really stands out to you.
I loved that org chart, how they wrote the description. I just flipped past that page, so that's why I brought it up again, and how they signed the contract for each one of those.
Yeah, I got to get back and redo our org chart. I've handed it out many times, and whenever we make a change, whenever we hire somebody, I used to always update it and pass it out, right? And it went a long way just in helping people understand their job and everyone else's jobs, because I think it's all straight in my head, but how are they supposed to know unless I paint the picture and put it on paper for them?
Yeah, because you're the chief reminder officer.
Chief reminding officer. Over and over again. Saying the same things.
You know what? I am not seeing my final note on here, so maybe I did already pass it.
Well, let me share this. This is, I think, a really good way to sum up the point of this book, right? Or visualize what you're trying to get to in your business. He says, this is on chapter 11. We spent a lot of time in chapter 11. And so it's on page 134. He says, imagine yourself taking a potential buyer through your business, explaining each component and how it works with every other component, how you've innovated systems and solutions to people problems, how you've quantified the results of those innovations, how you've orchestrated the innovations so they produce the same results every single time. Imagine yourself introducing the potential buyer of your business to your people and standing by while they proudly explain their accomplishments, accountabilities, and to a fascinated stranger. Imagine how impressed the potential buyer of your business would be upon being presented with such order, such predictability, and such irreproachable control. I think that's just a really good summary of the way to build a business, right? It's order, it's systems, it's planning, and it's
intentional.
I think, we always talk about our people are our greatest assets. And I think there's so much value in that, but I think everyone needs structure and guidance and guidelines and all of the infrastructure that's going to help them to be successful and to grow in a business.
Absolutely. I mean, a business in a sense is almost like a city. If you don't have streets and lines drawn on the streets and freeways with lines and all of those things, then people don't, I mean, can you imagine if all the street lines disappeared one day? That'd be chaos.
We would all drive on the right side of the street for a while, right? It would stick with us for a while and then eventually bedlam.
Yep. All right. Perfect. So I love this book. Recommend this book. I'm glad to have read it.
I've given it to a lot of people. It's a good gift for someone who's struggling, starting their business and, living that solopreneur frazzled life that we are trying to help people get out of. So if that's you, if you have not read this book, please pick it up, take a look at it, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Business Greater Than You.
All right. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Business Greater Than You podcast with Nelson Bars and Liz Sears. Our mission is to help lenders and agents like you.
If you're either already a full-time realtor or looking to become one, and you desire to be highly successful, if you are both a learner and a doer, a hard worker and a total team player, we would love to chat with you about joining our team. Visit us at businessgreaterthanyou.com.
If you're a loan officer or would like to be one, we have a path to help you learn the business and develop the skills needed to lead a high-performance origination team for better income and lifestyle.
And lastly, if you would like to work with either of us, we would love your business.
Do you have a question for a future show? Would you like to be considered as a guest on our show? If so, please call or text our listener line at 801-871-9130.